Ladies and gentlemen, the Empire has struck back. In my last video, I showed Magnus Carlsen playing against 13-year-old Grandmaster and child prodigy Andy Woodward, in which Andy was able to out-finesse Magnus in a very close game. However, this is still the world #1. It's always exciting to see a new prospect come up, but we have to give some respect to the OGs, alright? Magnus is the best player in the world, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, unless Zod can get his hands on a computer, alright? But let's go ahead and hop into this game. Andy opens with the white pieces here, and Magnus opens with the black pieces. Magnus decides to go for this double feed and Keto idea. It's a much more modern concept, with the idea being that you attack the center of the board with your pieces rather than your pawns. You can do this, but it's very important that you get either e4 or d5 pawn push going at some point, because if you don't and you just continue to develop like nothing's going on, let's just say black makes a ton of like wasteful moves, this will eventually happen and you're going to get crushed down the center of the board because white has a huge spatial advantage. So if you aren't careful to get the early push in, you're going to have your space taken away. Magnus recognizes this and goes for the early push. He's not worried about captures. This just loses a piece because the bishop on d3 is hanging, so he employs a little bit of tactical play in order to get this pawn push going in time. And now Andy decides he's going to reroute his bishop, get it pinned on against the black queen, and Magnus decides that's an annoying pin, so he decides to reroute. Once Andy sees Magnus back up, watch how he starts redirecting his pieces to focus on the king side, right? He starts angling everything, pointed directly at the king side. Magnus says, I don't care, I'm going to play positionally. I want to get my knight onto the f4 square and dominate the weak d3 square. Andy says, you know what, I'll do you one better. Let's forget positional play and let's just go into it right now. Now his idea with this is he's going to win material from this. The rook and bishop, or the rook and knight, are hanging in this position, and Magnus, instead of capturing on e1, decides he wants to go ahead and play with two pieces versus a rook. The reason he does this is because it's a blitz game. You don't have a lot of time, and the less ammunition white has on the board, the harder it's going to be for him to win. And if all Magnus has to do is survive and take this into an endgame. I say all with air quotation marks because it is easier said than done. And he accepts the capture, and now we have a position where Magnus is actually down upon a material. And now white exchanges, gets one rook cleared off the board. Oops. It's one rook cleared off the board. Queen to f5, trying to pierce black's position. White is trying to like go ahead and get something inside. He wants like maybe bishop to f6 down the line. He wants a rook to e1, but black is holding the position extremely well. He has fantastic piece control. There's never anything like pawn to g3. This just loses the game on the spot. Knight to e2, bishop to e4. It just traps the queen. There's nothing going on in the position for white, so he has to be careful here. He plays bishop to g3, and now black plays bishop to e4 anyway, harassing the white queen. And now Magnus trades the queens off the board. He survived the worst of it, and now it's just a simple matter of trading material off the board. He wants to simplify the game, so he gets rid of the bishop pair, realizing that he can just go ahead and plop a knight on d3. And now this rook on e2 is stuck to the defense of the b2 pawn. It can never really go anywhere, and it also has no entry squares along the e file. Ideally, white would like to do this and then get his rook like here, and now he'd be able to start chomping away the pawns, but there's absolutely no entry square for the white rook. Everything is perfectly covered. This is the world's greatest in-game player, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to see that kind of square control, all right? It's just par for the course. White tries to get something going as he realizes the black pawns are just cascading down his position. He tries to sacrifice a pawn. Magnus doesn't bite. There's still no entry squares for the white rook. He can't even go to f2 for a check. Magnus is just completely dominating this rook, and he tries one more attempt to go ahead and fork the c4 and g4 bishop, but now Magnus just moves the bishop back. A little more rerouting and maneuvering, stopping the pawn, and now all he has to do is take out the b2 pawn. Bishop to c2, putting the exclamation mark on the game. Knight takes b2 and knight to d1, and here Andy is forced to resign as there is absolutely nothing he can do to stop b2. Even if rook takes c2, Magnus promotes to a queen. Brilliantly executed game by Magnus, and they played a lot more games. I might go ahead and upload a few more. Honestly, Magnus dominated the set overall. I just wanted to go ahead and highlight a future young prospect. It's always nice to see the chess community coming out with new talent. Shout out to Andy. I have no doubt that we have yet to see his peak yet. Nowhere even close to it. I'm excited to see what he does in the future.